What happens when a homeless boy gets adopted by a billionaire, only to uncover a shocking truth years later? Meet Oliver, a street-smart kid who had spent years surviving on his own. When Daniel Kingston, a powerful CEO, takes him in, it seems like a dream come true. A new life, a fresh start, a chance at something real. But Oliver never expected that his past was far from forgotten, that the life he lost wasn't an accident. And when a long-buried secret comes to light, the truth shakes him to his core. Who was watching him before he disappeared? Why was he taken in the first place? And when the past finally catches up, will Oliver be ready for the truth? Stay tuned, because this is the story of a homeless boy, a billionaire with secrets, and a mystery that changes everything. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and subscribe the channel so the community can grow, and we can bring you more stories like this. Now let's get into it. The rain pelted the streets of Manhattan, turning the sidewalks into slick mirrors reflecting the city lights. A boy, no older than 10, huddled in the doorway of a closed deli, his thin hoodie soaked through. His stomach ached with hunger, but he ignored it. He was used to the feeling by now. His name was Oliver. The night was cold and his fingers were numb as he pulled his knees to his chest. He had been living like this for months, surviving off scraps and the kindness of strangers who rarely stopped to notice him. But tonight, something felt different. As Oliver closed his eyes, trying to block out the world, he heard the distinct sound of expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. A man had stopped in front of him, holding an umbrella that shielded him from the rain. Tall, well-dressed, and exuding an air of quiet authority, the man studied Oliver with a mix of curiosity and concern. His tailored coat and polished shoes screamed wealth. He didn't belong in this part of the city at this hour. "Hey, kid," the man finally said, his voice deep but not unkind. "What are you doing out here?" Oliver hesitated. Strangers rarely meant well, and he had learned not to trust easily. "Just waiting," he mumbled. "For what?" He had no answer. His silence spoke volumes. The man sighed, glancing around before crouching to Oliver's level. "You got anyone looking for you?" Oliver shook his head. After a long pause, the man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. "My name is Daniel Kingston," he said. "I run Kingston Enterprises. Ever heard of it?" Oliver shook his head again. Daniel smiled faintly. "Didn't think so. Listen, I can't leave you out here like this. How about you come with me, get some food, warm up?" Oliver's instincts screamed to refuse, but the hunger gnawed at his insides. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right," Daniel said, standing. "Let's get you out of the cold." 2 weeks later, Oliver found himself in a different world. Gone were the nights of sleeping on cold concrete. Instead, he had a warm bed in a penthouse overlooking Central Park. He was clean, well-fed, and dressed in clothes that actually fit him. But the strangest part? Daniel hadn't asked for anything in return. No conditions. No fine print. Daniel wasn't just some rich guy with a bleeding heart. He was a self-made billionaire, one of the most respected CEOs in New York. Yet despite his busy schedule, he made time for Oliver, checking in on him daily. The kindness felt foreign, unsettling even. One evening, as Oliver sat at the dining table, pushing his food around his plate, Daniel leaned back in his chair. "You're not used to this, are you?" Oliver shrugged. "Guess not." "Well, you better start getting used to it," Daniel said with a small smile, "because this is your home now." Oliver wanted to believe that, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, and he had no idea just how right he was. Over the next few weeks, Oliver slowly adjusted to his new life. The penthouse was bigger than anything he had ever seen, let alone lived in. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the space in natural light, offering a breathtaking view of Central Park. The kitchen was stocked with food he didn't even know how to pronounce, and his bedroom, his own bedroom, had a bed so soft he sank into it every night, and yet something felt off. Daniel was kind. too kind. He never lost his temper, never pressured Oliver to be anything other than himself. He bought him clothes, gave him space, even arranged for a private tutor to help him catch up on schoolwork. But Oliver couldn't shake the feeling that there was a reason behind all of it. One night, curiosity got the best of him. After dinner, Daniel had retreated to his home office for a call, leaving Oliver alone in the massive living room. With quiet steps, Oliver made his way down the hall, past the sleek paintings and modern decor, stopping outside the partially open office door. "No, I haven't told him yet." Daniel's voice was low, serious. "I need to be sure first." Oliver's breath caught. "Told him what?" "I know what's at stake. This has to be handled delicately," Daniel continued. There was a long pause, followed by a heavy sigh. "He's just a kid. He doesn't remember." "No, I can't risk that. If he finds out the truth too soon, it could ruin everything." Oliver's stomach twisted. What truth? He took a step back, heart pounding, suddenly feeling like an outsider in a home that wasn't really his. A strange sensation crept over him. The feeling that his past, the life he barely remembered before the streets, wasn't what he thought it was. The next morning at breakfast, Oliver tried to act normal, but his mind raced with questions. Was Daniel hiding something about why he took him in? Did he know something about Oliver's past? "Everything okay?" Daniel asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Oliver hesitated. "Yeah," he lied. Daniel studied him for a second before nodding. "Good, because I was thinking. We should take a trip, just you and me." Oliver blinked. "A trip?" Daniel smiled. "Yeah, somewhere nice. I think you'll like it." A trip. It sounded normal enough, but after what Oliver had overheard last night, he wasn't so sure. His gut told him this wasn't just about getting away, this was about finding out the truth. A week later, Oliver found himself on a private jet for the first time in his life. The leather seats, the endless supply of snacks, the quiet hum of the engines. It was surreal. Daniel sat across from him, casually flipping through a business magazine as if this were just another ordinary day. "Where exactly are we going?" Oliver finally asked, unable to hide his suspicion any longer. Daniel glanced up, smiling slightly. "Chicago." Oliver frowned. He had never been to Chicago before. As far as he knew, he had no connections there. But something told him Daniel wasn't just taking him on a sightseeing trip. "Why?" Daniel shut the magazine and leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "There's something I need to show you." That didn't exactly ease Oliver's nerves. The flight was smooth, but Oliver couldn't relax. His mind kept going back to the conversation he had overheard. If he finds out the truth too soon, it could ruin everything. The words echoed in his head. What truth? And why Chicago? After landing at O'Hare, a sleek black SUV was waiting for them on the tarmac. No security lines, no waiting, just straight into the car. Oliver wasn't sure whether to be impressed or unnerved by how effortlessly Daniel moved through the world. The city was cold, the streets bustling with people wrapped in heavy coats. As the car wove through downtown, Oliver tried to read Daniel's face, but the man was unusually quiet. About 30 minutes later, they pulled up to a modest brick house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, nothing like the luxury Oliver had grown used to. It looked like the kind of place where normal families lived. Daniel exhaled, then turned to Oliver. "Come on." Oliver followed him up the driveway, his heart pounding. Daniel knocked once. The door opened almost immediately. A woman stood there, her face paling the moment she saw them. She was in her mid-40s with dark hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, her brown eyes wide with shock. Oliver had never seen her before. At least, he didn't think he had. But the way she was looking at him, like she was seeing a ghost, sent chills down his spine. "Oh my God," she whispered. Oliver stiffened. "Who is she?" Daniel put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Oliver," he said carefully. "This is Maria Dawson." The name meant nothing to him. "She's your mother." If you're yet to like the video and subscribe, make sure to do that now. Oliver's breath caught in his throat. My mother? He stared at the woman, waiting for something to click, a memory, a feeling, anything. But there was nothing. Just a hollow confusion that made his chest tighten. No, he muttered, shaking his head. That's not possible. Maria covered her mouth with trembling fingers, tears welling in her eyes. Oliver, baby, it's really you. He took a step back, his legs suddenly unsteady. No, he repeated, louder this time. I don't know you. Maria let out a shaky breath. You were taken from me, she said, voice breaking. I thought you were gone forever. Oliver turned to Daniel, his pulse pounding in his ears. Is this some kind of joke? Daniel's face was unreadable. It's the truth. No, Oliver snapped, anger rising. That's not possible. My mom, His voice faltered. He didn't know what he had been about to say. That she had abandoned him? That she had never come looking? That she had never existed in the first place? Maria reached for him, but Oliver instinctively recoiled. Her face crumpled with hurt, and for a split second, guilt flashed through him. I need you to listen, Daniel said gently. You were kidnapped when you were 4 years old. The words slammed into Oliver like a freight train. What? Maria wiped at her tears. I searched for you for years. The police, the media, everyone tried, but there was nothing. No trace. And then, one day, it was like the world just gave up. Oliver shook his head furiously. That doesn't make sense. If that's true, how did I end up? He stopped, his stomach twisting painfully. Daniel exhaled. You don't remember, do you? Oliver squeezed his eyes shut, trying to force something, anything to surface. But his past had always been a blur before the streets. There were flashes of memories, cold nights, unfamiliar faces, always moving, but nothing concrete. His voice cracked. I don't remember anything. Maria let out a soft sob. That's because whoever took you didn't want you to. The room spun. Oliver felt like he was falling, like the ground beneath him had disappeared. I know this is a lot, Daniel said, his voice steady, but I found you for a reason. You deserve to know where you came from. Oliver swallowed hard, his gaze darting between Daniel and Maria. If this was true, if he really had been taken, then who had raised him? Who had lied to him all these years? And more importantly, why? Oliver felt like he couldn't breathe. His whole life, the bits and pieces he thought he knew, was unraveling right in front of him. He took a step back from Maria, his mind racing. You're telling me I had a family this whole time? That I was kidnapped? Maria nodded, wiping away fresh tears. I never stopped looking for you. But that doesn't make sense. Oliver's voice wavered. How did I end up on the streets? Who took me and why? Maria's face darkened. The police never found out who did it. One day you were playing in our front yard, and the next, you were gone. Her voice cracked. We thought maybe it was a trafficking ring or someone looking for ransom, but no one ever contacted us. Then the years passed, and everyone kept saying I had to move on. Daniel spoke up, his voice calm but firm. I started looking into your case a few months ago. A private investigator I hired found old records, shelters you might have stayed in, gaps in paperwork where you seemed to disappear and reappear in different states. He looked at Oliver intently. Someone was keeping you hidden, but at some point, you slipped through the cracks and ended up on your own. Oliver swallowed hard. His head was spinning. Maria stepped closer. I know this is overwhelming, but you are my son. I can prove it. We can do a DNA test, whatever it takes. A deep part of him wanted to believe her, but another part, the part that had spent years surviving on the streets, trusting no one, was screaming at him to run. How do I even know you're telling the truth? Oliver's voice was hoarse. Maria's face crumpled with pain, but Daniel answered for her. "Because I had the DNA test done weeks ago." Oliver's stomach dropped. "What?" Daniel nodded. "When I found you, I had a suspicion. I took a sample from your toothbrush and ran it against missing persons reports. Maria's DNA was already in the system." Oliver's knees felt weak. And it was a match? 100%. Silence filled the room, thick with emotion. Maria clutched her chest like she was afraid Oliver would disappear all over again. "I just want to get to know you, Oliver. You don't have to make any decisions right now." He felt like the walls were closing in. "I need air." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked out the door, the cold Chicago wind hitting his face like a slap. He sucked in deep breaths, trying to process everything. A mother he never knew existed, a past he couldn't remember, a truth that had been hidden from him for years. And yet the biggest question still remained: if Maria was his real mother, who had taken him? And why had they let him go? Oliver stood on the sidewalk, his breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. The city bustled around him, cars honking, people chatting, the wind whistling through the streets, but it all felt distant, like he was underwater, kidnapped, taken, hidden. He pressed his palms against his temples. None of this made sense. Daniel stepped outside a moment later, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't speak right away, just stood beside Oliver, letting the silence stretch between them. After a moment, Daniel exhaled. "I know this is a lot." Oliver let out a hollow laugh. "That's an understatement." Daniel nodded. "I remember when I first heard about you. Something about your case didn't sit right with me. Too many gaps, too many unanswered questions." He glanced at Oliver. "That's why I had to find out the truth." Oliver hesitated. He wanted to be angry at Daniel for not telling him sooner. But without him, would he have ever known? "What if I don't want this truth?" Oliver muttered. "What if I just want to forget?" Daniel's voice was gentle. "You've been surviving for so long, Oliver. But this is your past, and it's your choice what you do with it." Oliver swallowed hard, his emotions tangled into a mess of anger, fear, and something else, something he wasn't ready to name yet. Behind them, the front door creaked open. Maria stood in the doorway, hesitant but hopeful. "I won't push you," she said softly, "but if you want answers, I have them." Oliver's chest ached. He had spent so many years believing he was unwanted, forgotten, and now here was this woman, his mother, offering something he had always convinced himself he didn't need. "Why now?" Oliver finally asked. "Why did it take this long for me to find out?" Maria's face darkened. "Because someone didn't want you to remember." A chill ran down Oliver's spine. Maria stepped closer, her hands trembling. "I don't know who took you, but I do know this. Whoever they were, they made sure you never found your way back to me." Oliver clenched his fists. "Then why let me go? Why dump me on the streets?" Maria shook her head. "That's what we need to figure out." The weight of it all crashed into Oliver at once. He had spent years wondering where he came from, why he had no family, and now he had the chance to uncover everything. But was he ready for the truth? Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to decide right now." Oliver closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. No, he didn't have to decide now, but deep down, he knew this wasn't over, because if someone had stolen his past, it was time to find out why. That night, Oliver lay awake in the hotel room Daniel had arranged for them. The city lights filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. His mind wouldn't stop racing. Somewhere out there, someone knew the truth. Someone had taken him from his real family, wiped away his past, and left him with nothing but questions. And now, he needed answers. A knock at the door made him sit up. He hesitated before walking over and cracking it open. Maria stood outside, looking uncertain. "Can we talk?" Oliver hesitated, then stepped aside. Maria entered cautiously, like she was afraid she'd scare him away. She sat on the edge of the couch while Oliver stayed near the window, arms crossed. "I know you don't trust me yet," she started, "and I don't blame you, but I want to help you remember." Oliver swallowed. "What if I don't want to?" Maria's eyes softened. "Then you don't have to. But I think you do want to know. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here." He exhaled slowly. "You said earlier that someone didn't want me to find out the truth. What do you mean?" Maria's fingers twisted together in her lap. "There were things that never made sense about your disappearance. The police thought it was random, a stranger grabbing a child off the street, but I never believed that." She looked up at him. "I always thought someone took you on purpose." Oliver's stomach tightened. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because we were being watched before you disappeared." A chill ran down Oliver's spine. "What?" Maria nodded. "For weeks before that day, I kept noticing strange things. A car parked across the street too often. A man I didn't recognize showing up at the grocery store at the same time as us. I told your father, but he thought I was being paranoid." Her voice wavered. "And then one day, you were gone." Oliver's hands clenched. "So you think whoever took me had been planning it?" "Yes." Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. "But I don't know why. And when the police found nothing, I started to wonder if I'd imagined it all, if I was just a mother desperate to believe there was more to the story." Oliver's head spun. If Maria was right, then his kidnapping wasn't some random tragedy. It was something bigger. But why? Maria reached into her purse and pulled out an old, worn photograph. She handed it to him with shaky fingers. "This was taken a week before you disappeared," she said. Oliver stared at the image. It was of him. 4 years old, grinning wide as he sat on his father's shoulders. But in the background, slightly out of focus, was a man standing near the edge of the yard, watching. A shiver ran through Oliver's body. "Who is he?" he asked. Maria's face was pale. "I don't know." But Oliver could feel it in his gut. That man, whoever he was, held the key to everything. The next morning, Oliver sat at the hotel room table, staring at the photograph. He had spent half the night memorizing every detail, the angle of the man's stance, the way he seemed to linger in the background like he didn't belong. Maria had no idea who he was, neither did the police, but Oliver was sure of one thing. This man wasn't just some random passerby. Daniel entered the room, setting 2 cups of coffee on the table. "You didn't sleep?" Oliver barely looked up. "No." Daniel sat across from him, glancing at the photograph. "You think he's the one?" Oliver nodded slowly. "I don't know why, but I can feel it." He hesitated. "I need to find him." Maria, who had been sitting on the couch, stiffened. "Oliver, we don't even know where to start. This picture is almost 12 years old." Daniel, however, leaned forward. "That's not entirely true." Oliver and Maria turned to him. "I ran the photo through facial recognition last night," Daniel said. "I have a contact in private security who owed me a favor." Oliver's pulse quickened. "And?" Daniel exhaled. "It wasn't easy. The image is old, blurry, but we got a partial match." Oliver's hands clenched. "Who is he?" Daniel slid his phone across the table. Oliver's breath caught as he stared at the screen. A name, an address, a life attached to the shadowy figure in the photo. James Holloway. The name meant nothing to Oliver, but the city next to it, St. Louis, Missouri, felt like the next step in a puzzle that had haunted him his whole life. Maria's voice shook. "You're not seriously thinking of going there?" Oliver looked up, his mind made up. "I have to." Maria reached for his hand. "Oliver, please. What if he's dangerous?" Oliver swallowed hard. "I can't live the rest of my life wondering what happened to me. I need to know why he was watching us, why I was taken." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Then I'm coming with you." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You won't have to do this alone." He looked at Oliver. "I'll book the flight." Oliver turned back to the photo, his heart hammering. For years he had been running from his past. Now he was about to confront it, and something told him the truth was far bigger than he ever imagined. The truth has a way of finding its way back, no matter how deeply it's buried. Oliver spent his whole life believing he was alone, unwanted, but the reality was far more complicated. His story is a reminder that sometimes the answers we seek aren't lost. They're just waiting to be uncovered. When faced with the unknown, fear tells us to run, but courage pushes us to seek the truth. And in the end, it's the truth that sets us free. So if you ever find yourself questioning your past, your path, or your purpose, remember, the truth is always worth finding. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notification to be the first to know when interesting and lesson-packed stories like this one drop.